Okay, so have you ever read a resignation letter that's basically one big mic drop? You know, the kind that echoes across the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, okay.
It's this software engineer's, well, it's more of a scorching goodbye letter to the Guardian.
Hmm.
And get this, it's not your typical see ya email.
Really? What makes this one so special?
It's like she weaponized satire.
Yeah, that's what's got everyone talking, right? It's the way she uses satire. It's not just about the allegations, which are serious enough on their own, but it's the way she writes, the style. Like she took all those empty corporate buzzwords and turned them against them.
It's like she's saying, all right, you want to play buzzword bingo? Game on. I mean, she compares the Guardian to Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers.
Which is, well, that's not exactly the company you want to be linked to if you're supposed to be. Like the gold standard of ethical
Right.
journalism.
Talk about missing the mark.
Totally. And that's what makes her critique so effective, you know?
Yeah.
It's that contrast. It's like she's holding a mirror up to all those corporate mission statements and exposing how hollow they really are.
She doesn't just mention it in passing either. It's woven throughout the whole letter. Remember that cyber incident, as they called it, back in 22 at The Guardian?
Yeah, vaguely.
Well, she makes it sound like some kind of team building exercise.
Oh, wow.
Chilling, but also kind of hilarious, right?
It's brilliant. It's like she's saying everything's fine
Yeah.
while everything's falling apart. She makes you see how ridiculous it is trying to keep up a happy face when things are actually really bad.
Exactly. It's like she's peeling back the layers and exposing what's underneath this carefully constructed facade. But then she gets to the heart of it, and it's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
A toxic work environment, and she doesn't hold back.
And that's where the details are so important, you know? She's not just complaining, she's giving you concrete examples, specific instances of discrimination based on disability, gender, race,
Wow.
bullying, gaslighting, attempts to silence her. It's all laid out there, and it's frankly kind of horrifying. You can't ignore it.
One phrase that really stuck with me was the purposive collective manufacture of opinions and events with the aim of ostracization. I mean, that's not something you just throw out there lightly. That speaks to a really deliberate and honestly pretty sinister kind of cruelty.
Definitely. And that's what makes this letter so impactful. It takes these experiences that are often silenced, brushed under the rug, and brings them out into the open. This isn't just venting, this is a calculated takedown of a system that allows this to happen.
It's like this constant thread throughout the letter, right?
Yeah.
This sense that things are being manipulated, that
Yeah.
there's this deliberate attempt to control the narrative.
Right.
She even uses the phrase amnesia, personal, female-oriented, conflict-related, or otherwise.
Oh, wow.
As if she's calling out this like selective memory, the kind that seems to always protect the abusers and silence the victims.
It's a pattern we see over and over, you know? It's about whose experiences are believed, whose pain is acknowledged, and whose is dismissed. And that part, that female-oriented, it just hits you, you know? It shows how these power dynamics, how they play out in these subtle, often unspoken ways.
Yeah, it's insidious. And what gets me is how she uses language, not just to describe what happened, but to make you feel it.
Yeah.
Like when she thanks the company for her new heart problems.
Right.
It's darkly funny, but it also makes you cringe a little inside, right?
That's the thing. She manages to blend this really sharp wit with this like raw pain and outrage.
Yeah.
It's hard to dismiss because on one hand, she's making you laugh, but on the other, she's calling out something deeply, deeply wrong.
Exactly. And she doesn't shy away from naming names either. She talks about how when she tried to get help, she was met with silence. Like accountability was just this mythical creature that nobody had ever actually seen.
Which is something I think a lot of people will relate to, unfortunately. That feeling of being stuck in a system that's rigged against you and where speaking up feels riskier than just staying quiet.
And yet here we are talking about her letter because she did speak up. She wrote this whole thing and put it out there for everyone to see.
That takes guts.
It does.
Especially when you consider the potential consequences for whistleblowers, but it also shows the power of refusing to be silenced. She took a risk, a huge one, but in doing so, she created space for other people to maybe feel like they could come forward too, to share their own stories, and hopefully to push for change.
Just say enough is enough.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how powerfully she uses language, the specifics of what she's alleging, but she also goes beyond her own experience, doesn't she? She connects it to these bigger issues, societal issues.
Yeah, absolutely. She talks about things like the erosion of social safety nets, the decline of journalistic integrity. She even draws these really interesting parallels to historical figures who challenged power structures, oppressive systems. I think that's really crucial because it takes this from being just one person's story and makes it part of something much larger.
Yeah, it's like she's asking, if this could happen at The Guardian, this supposedly progressive institution, where else is this happening? And honestly, it's a question we should all be asking. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it, right? If this level of, I don't know, toxicity can just fester in a place like The Guardian, it makes you wonder what's going on in other organizations, even the ones that, seem to have it all figured out, the ones with the big pronouncements about diversity and respect.
It really makes you question things. It shows how deeply ingrained these problems can be. It's not always obvious. It's often baked into the power structures, the culture of a place.
Exactly. And that's why this letter, it's more than just a resignation letter. It's a warning. It tells us we can't just assume everything is hunky-dory just because a company has a good PR team. We have to be willing to dig deeper, to really listen to what people, especially those who are often marginalized, are saying about their experiences. And then we have to hold these institutions accountable. So as we wrap up here, I keep coming back to this one question. What can we actually take away from this one person's experience? What can we do, whether we're in charge or just trying to navigate our own careers? What are the takeaways here?
Well, for one thing, we have to be able to spot the red flags. And this letter is full of them. It's like a crash course in identifying when things aren't right. Like, are there certain voices that never seem to get heard? Are there behaviors that just feel off? Even if they're not, technically against the rules, we can't just ignore those feelings.
And don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
Even if it feels risky.
Exactly. Speaking up, it can be really hard, especially when you feel like the odds are stacked against you. But remember, staying silent, it just lets things stay the same. This letter, it reminds us that we do have a voice, and that even when we're up against these big institutions, we have a right to demand better.
It's like that saying, all that's needed for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Sometimes speaking up is the most powerful thing you can do.
Absolutely. And if you're the one in charge, if you're the boss, then listen to what your people are telling you. Create an environment where they feel safe speaking their minds, where disagreeing isn't seen as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow.
This whole deep dive started with just one resignation letter.
Right.
One person's very pointed, very public critique of one company's culture.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've seen, it's really a story about so much more than that. It's about power, about who has it and who doesn't. It's about accountability or the lack of it. And most importantly, it's about having the courage to speak truth to power, no matter the cost.
And it's about the ripple effects of that courage. This letter, it resonated with so many people because it gave a voice to experiences that, sadly, are all too common. It started a conversation, and sometimes that's how real change begins.
She put her own experience in historical context, talking about figures who challenged the powers that be throughout history. So here's something to think about. What can we learn from those who dared to speak truth to power, even when it was dangerous? Because sometimes that's how we make a difference. That's how we change the system, one brave voice at a time.